Is it too late to repair the damage third world immigration has done to the UK?
Well, I think it's easy to say that. I think there's a great temptation amongst conservative-minded people, in a way, almost to want to have lost. There's a sort of Gothic sensibility amongst many people in the conservative movement in all countries, I think. They want to believe, après moi le déluge, and I'm the last of my type, and it's this sort of the same idea that motivates a film like The Last Man on Earth. It's an exciting, romantic image of wanting to be defeated almost. And I think that is a funny sort of element on the conservative movement in all countries. And I'm sort of drawn that way myself sometimes. I do sometimes think it would be rather nice to be the last of a certain type. It's like the film The Leopard, based on the novel by Lampedusa, this Sicilian aristocrat who was the last of his line, and he writes about the end of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in 1870, when Italy was united for the first time since the Romans, and how his whole world changed and was completely turned upside down. And it's a book suffused with melancholy and longing and just richness and beauty. And that appeals to conservative-minded people who are naturally melancholic, naturally rather miserable and pessimistic and wanting to fear the worst. There's a book by John Derbyshire called We're All Doomed, and I think that really evokes very well the classic conservative mentality, the paleo-conservative mentality anyhow. The neo-conservatives tend to be much more upbeat and utopian, and this is one of the reasons we dislike them so much, because extraordinarily annoying and naive. It is certainly a very serious issue. It's something that an unavoidable evil that has been allowed to happen by successive governments of both Conservative and Labour politicians. But nevertheless, I think it's very easy to say that it is too late. But even so, even if you take the worst possible figures into account, the British population is roughly 10% ethnic minority. There's a long way to go before the situation cannot be turned around. And I think the other thing that we all sometimes forget is that things can and sometimes do change very quickly under the pressure of events that we can't foresee. And very often they're terrible events, things that nobody would wish, but nevertheless they do have effects. For instance, one could foresee another 9/11 style attack in London, for instance. One would not wish it obviously for a moment, but it could happen tomorrow. It could be happening now for all I know, which could in turn be met with revenge attacks and so forth, and there could be all sorts of horrible implications. So things can turn around for better or for worse very, very quickly. And I think we ought to always remember that when we sit here, wanting to be in love with despair and defeat. Well, if there was to be another big Muslim-style attack in the UK, I think Islam is already under siege to some extent. There are already proposals to ban the burqa in several European countries, and there is a movement now to do the same growing in the UK. Personally, I'm opposed to it, actually. I don't see anything wrong with Islam as a discrete value system. I think it's a perfectly noble tradition in its own right, which has given rise to a great civilization. So I've no particular problem with it. Nevertheless, it does pose particular difficulties when it comes to the West, not just the modern secular liberal West that everyone talks about and that neoconservatives mean when they mean the West, but even Christendom. It's something that is fundamentally at odds. And if you look back at European history, the history of our confrontation with Islam is an extremely unfortunate one. We tend to only meet them at times of war. They come as oppressors, as invaders, as pirates, and we sometimes do the same to them. So the whole tradition of confrontation between our civilizations has always been a negative one, and that can't be just wished away. And all of those ancient stereotypes from all of European history, because Islamic pirates, for instance, raided the coast of Ireland and southern England, so they've had even Iceland, I think, on one occasion. So they've had to reach much more than just around the Mediterranean basin, and so therefore every European country has got some kind of folk memory of Islamic subjugation, and more Islamic bombings would feed into that. They would reinforce that and bring all those memories come bubbling back to the surface. As it is in countries like Austria and France and Germany and a lot of the Balkan countries, and Greece in particular, there's deep unease about what's happening already with Kosovo, for instance, and with the increase in Muslim immigration into Europe. And one more bomb in any city, or even a serious attempted bombing attack, would raise all of these things all over again. We've already seen in a lot of European countries, like in Holland and Sweden, in Germany and in Austria, you've seen a sudden upsurge of interest in anti-Islamic politics. And the more restive they become, the more that sentiment will rise to the surface. I think it is inevitable that there will have to be some sort of awful confrontation, and I regret it bitterly, because, as I say, I have no particular beef with Islam. It's a noble tradition in its own right. I don't think it belongs in Europe, And I think many millions of people feel the same way.